Welcome to the High Quality Fun podcast, where tough times make good stories. On today's episode, Jesse Cody shares his experience from struggling with mental health issues to finding solace and purpose through hiking the Appalachian Trail. Despite the difficulties, he finds healing in nature, forming deep connections with fellow hikers, and finding purpose in developing a nonprofit called Hike the Good Hike. Through this nonprofit, he's hiked more than 10,000 miles, helping spread awareness, and seeks to inspire others to overcome their own struggles by embracing the healing powers of the wilderness. Stay tuned for this episode of the High Quality Fun podcast.
Sure, man. Yeah. So again, my name's Jesse, and as a hiker, I go by the name Boston Mule. And I found my way to hiking just over 9 years ago, man. But hiking wasn't something that was in my life prior to those 9 years. I really knew very little about it. I was born and raised in Cambridge, Massachusetts, and spent the majority of my life up to before I was 40 in Cambridge, with about 5 years in New York City. And I guess the best way to describe me and why you have me on here, man, is that I was a man for many years who struggled with mental health. I can remember as far back as being a kid struggling with anxiety and insecurities. And I think, like most people, men and women and beyond, I noticed things, but I was afraid to talk about things. I think when you're young, you think it's normal, that every kid is going through it. As you grow a little bit older, you start worrying about the thoughts and the way you feel, and what depression feels like I said, anxiety feels like, and you start thinking you're not normal. But if you speak up about it, people are going to look at you like you're not normal. So you do a pretty good job of trying to figure out how to hide mental health issues. In high school, I was a pretty successful runner. I was a 7-time state champion. And by the time I was a senior, I ran the fastest high school mile time in the United States. And with all that success, man, and wins, and, things, when I reflect back on my mental health, I remember the losses more than anything else and how they affected me. And they really fed into my insecurities and such, especially when I thought to myself, maybe I was letting everybody down in my life when I lost a race, which was crazy for the amount of races I won. It was, you lose sometimes. And I just didn't think that was normal. And I was fortunate enough to receive a full scholarship, Division I scholarship for running. And once I was kind of out of the nest of protection, my family, my coach and stuff, I really struggled even more. I kind of just hated the feeling of thinking all the time that I had, when I ran races, I had to win. Like most kids that go into college, I discovered drinking and started doing too much of that. But within 6 months, man, I flunked out of college and I lost my full scholarship. Very difficult at that time. Again, as I told you before, talk about really being worried about letting people down. And then you have to return to your hometown because you really have nowhere else to go. And then you got to face the music there, in terms of your family, your former teammates, your friends, and beyond. As time went on, I really worked on myself to just try to make the best of what I had, and to kind of learn from my mistakes or learn from my experiences in life. But those mental health struggles, man, they just grew bigger and bigger, man. And even though I try to do things to, like, at least have a good life in terms of a career and such, I just wanted to find a place where I almost could be in a hole and not have to do much to kind of just get by. I found my way into the restaurant business, and it's not to say that that's not a serious career. By what I just said, I just found a place where I knew if I just did enough work and made sure that at the end of the night, the money got into the safe from the restaurant till that I'd get a paycheck and I could keep my job. And throughout those years of being in the restaurant business, man, these issues that I've talked about, a lot of narcissistic behavior started coming out of my fears of who I was and myself. And so then I would take the things that were, within me, and I'd project them out onto women that I dated. And so, it's funny. I say narcissistic behavior because when it comes to narcissistic behavior and narcissism, if you're a true narcissist, you can never really recognize that you're a narcissist. And when I was exhibiting narcissistic behavior, man, it really troubled me. And I felt horrible if I was verbally abusive or, just making accusations. And so it all weighed on me, man. And I would say, it was probably my late 20s when I really started thinking thoughts of suicide. And, more so when they first started coming on, just kind of wishing I wasn't here, wishing that I could find a way just to be gone because I hated who I was. But never really taking the steps to make that a realization. But throughout my 30s, those grew because my behavior stayed the same. I was seeking no help. I wasn't talking to anybody in my life. I wasn't talking to anybody in my life that was in my corner that probably would have done everything they could to help me. I didn't have a family that wouldn't have been supported. They would have done everything for me. There's so much love in my family that if I had spoken up together, I'm sure we could have found some ways to better who I was and what I was going through. But I was afraid, man. And, that is a very common thing with most people that struggle with depression and suicidal ideation. And so it was going into my 40th birthday, man, that, my friends and family had discussed putting something big on for me because it's a big birthday. And I was really excited about that. But I also had these thoughts where I was like, I don't know if I'll see another birthday after this. So let's make the best of it, and so that party arrived and it was a beautiful event, man. And I remember just having this moment within that party where, this whole wave of emotion hit me looking around at 50 plus people that were there to celebrate me and that loved me. And I just had these thoughts of like, how can somebody who has so much love in their life think constantly about taking their own life? And that really weighed on me, man. That really hit me hard because I started understanding you've done nothing to try to find your way out of this. Like you've done nothing to see if there is another side, you've done nothing to see if like all this darkness that is consuming you, if possible, if there's possibly a way to find your way to some light. And so after that party, for about a week or so, I started thinking, what can I do to get help? Like, what's the first step? I'm still terrified to speak up. And, when I was thinking about all this in a happenstance, like in a crazy way, the book by Bill Bryson, A Walk in the Woods, found its way into my life. It was actually the second time it found its way into my life. I had read it in my early 20s and thought it was a great book. If you don't know anything about it, it's about the Appalachian Trail. It's about a man who discovers it in his backyard of New Hampshire. And he was a very successful man. He was a professor at Dartmouth. But when he discovered that there was this footpath from Georgia to Maine, he kind of got hit by it and was like, I have some things in my life, some questions within myself that I haven't found the answers to yet. And maybe a long walk would help me with that. And so when this book came into my life again for the second time and I gave it a reread and I read that passage, of course, that struck me because I was like, man, this guy seems to have a pretty good life and he has some questions about himself that he'd like some answers to. I'm somebody who literally I'm trying to just really answer a boatload more of questions than what Bill Bryson was looking for. And so I thought to myself, maybe a long walk in the woods would be something that could be helpful because I have nothing to lose. Like right now, my back is so against the wall, I'm willing to try anything. And I could realize right there that I still wasn't ready to speak up and talk about what I was going through, but maybe getting out there will help me find a way to two things. Maybe the walk itself would give me some help. And two, maybe the walk itself would give me the courage to start speaking up about what I was going through. Long story short, man, 2 months later with a backpack full of my life strapped to my back, I took steps off of Springer Mountain in Georgia and started walking the Appalachian Trail. I always tell this because I think it's important. When I tell you I had zero to little experience hiking, the first time I ever slept in a tent was night one on the Appalachian Trail. So, wow. Yeah, so this was seriously something that I had no understanding of, but I was willing to learn along the way because, again, I felt like I had to take a real major leap to find what I was seeking. And like I said earlier, one of the things going into that, I always thought to myself was, hey man, you did a lot of running in your life, man. And like, there are a lot of challenges within that running. This isn't really that different. You tell yourself a lot of things to convince yourself that you can do something. But man, I took that thing on with a lot of hope, a lot of inspiration. I learned a lot of things along the way. And, it took me 6 months, man, just a tad over 6 months, but I hiked every step of that Appalachian Trail to Mount Katahdin in Maine. So, that was the beginning of my hiking career, but more importantly, and where I'll end this before you might have some questions, is that it gave me a lot of what I was seeking. It showed me that I had the ability to persevere, to overcome. It showed me that if I truly wanted something in life, I could find my way to it. It brought in a significant amount of light into my life that I was so desiring. But most importantly, it also told me and taught me that like the journey doesn't end when you hit Katahdin, that every step that you take afterwards will still be a challenge, but you'll have the tool sets now to understand who you are and what you can overcome. And that I think was the most important thing to me, because I knew when I finished that hike that I'd still have to face a lot about myself. But I knew, and I always to this day tell myself, if you can hike 2,200 miles, you can do anything.
That's inspiring. And I feel like in this episode, I'm gonna be reflecting a lot on myself, because like I haven't hit these like low spares of depression, but I'll be turning 33 at the end of the month, and I think you're in your 50s, and I mean there's a lot to say about these like mental illnesses that people go through and like mental struggles. I mean, half of it is not even knowing how to ask for help. Like I know when I'm like feeling down at a month or something like that, like I don't even know how to go to my wife, and she's the most supportive person ever to me, but it's like I don't even know what questions to ask. So sometimes just like getting out there and clearing your own head is like the best way to even start asking for help, because it's just like a difficult thing to navigate.
And you also have to understand too, man, is that depending on who you ask, a lot of people don't have the answers. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like you gotta start figuring out who can I talk to that actually might have some answers on what steps I need to take to get out of this darkness. So it can be really hard, man, for people in your life when you actually fess up and say, these are things that I'm thinking, because who's in that position? I truly do get an understanding of why mental health is a difficult thing to navigate, not just for the person going through it, but for the people that are being affected by it, because no one really has the answers, right? Unless you're clinically trained. So, yeah.
And we'll probably get into this more later, but have you found that like being a male and having these issues has been harder or different? I feel like guys are sometimes a little reluctant to ask for help, and they put a lot of stress on their own shoulders. So it's a much different struggle for some men compared to women.
Yeah, I mean, listen, I would never say that it came from my family or even coaches, to the fact that it was like, hey, you're a man or you're a boy, you're going to be a man, toughen up, right? Like that was never significant in my life from the people around me, but in society it was, right? And so, of course, like I thought to myself, you should be stronger than this, or you should be able to deal with this on your own. Like you're a man, like you're a problem solver. That's what we're told that males can do. So yes, that definitely made it, like a difficult passage to address it and to talk about it out loud. The fact that like sensitivity is not something that is supposed to be showcased by a man, right? And I learned early on that was foolish, and I definitely learned through this hiking journey that it was even more foolish, that being able to express yourself and being able to show your soul and your feelings is so important to every person on this planet, because it's an outlet, man. It's a way to let some things go. And definitely when you can find others in a community of people who understand that are doing the same thing, man, that in itself is very therapeutic. That's this equal, if not more so important than, seeing a therapist.
When you were, I think in a different episode that you recorded, you said that you were working at a bar at the time. And how did, I guess, alcohol impact you during all this? You're a little bit, you're older than me, and you, at this time in your life, you didn't have the stimulant of a phone in front of your face nonstop or social media or anything, which may have been good or bad. But I can't imagine that working at a bar where, you have alcohol on tap at any time was helpful for where you were in your life.
Yeah, I abused it. You know what I mean? Which in a sense makes it a problem. But it was around me at all times. And I know you hear the term a lot. It numbed the pain, or it numbed your problems. Maybe at times it did, but what it did for me is it surfaced my anger and my frustration. And I think it truly fueled my narcissistic behavior. So, that relationship with alcohol was, my thoughts were, if I'm drunk, then I don't have to really think, those thoughts in my head aren't winning the battle. I can quiet them a bit. But then there was just another set of problems to deal with when I was drinking. And, most of my time in that business, like, alcohol was as consistent as guests sitting at my bar, food coming out of the kitchen. Like, it was something that it was just kind of part of your life, right? Alcoholism, I mean, there are different layers to it, and I'm sure, like, if it's a problem, it's alcoholism, right? If it's not bringing something on that's positive, it's alcoholism. If you're not saying no to it, it's alcoholism. I have a much different relationship with alcohol now. It's not a problem, thankfully, and it doesn't bring up any of the darkness that was consuming me before. And I'm grateful for that. I'm grateful that at least addiction is something that I've never had a problem with. But again, I always want to make sure when I talk about the restaurant industry, the bar industry, is I'm never going to sit there and say, don't get into it. I'm just going to say, know yourself if it's something that you get into, because it really can be a shark, man. It really can come up and bite you, especially if you're struggling with any type of problem. Being in that industry is tough, man. It is tough industry. And for me, it's a great tool to have if you need some money to jump behind a bar somewhere and work for a while. But I think I recognize about myself, it's not why I'm here, right? It's not like, at some point in your life, you start recognizing, what am I supposed to, why did I get time on planet Earth? And I'm more so over the last few years recognizing that there's something more for me out there that I need to be doing with my time here.
Yeah, and I guess the last thing that kind of resonated with your introduction story is, like, it sounds like you isolated yourself, and when you were forced to show up to that 40th birthday party, forced to show up to your party where everyone's there that was invited to celebrate you, that was kind of a moment of realization. Maybe you didn't have the strength or the want to, reach out to people and go hang out with people and see who is actually there with you. I know that that's something that I struggle with from time to time. Is, life is so busy that by the end of the day, you don't really think about picking up the phone and going and hanging out with a buddy, or making time to do that, because you're just so stressed out by other things. But in those moments when you actually are around all these people, it's like a gleaming star. You see that optimism, you see the smile on their face, the laughter you have with your friends, and that's always like a good checkpoint, and to bring back happiness into your pits at that moment.
Yeah. Listen, man, you kind of hit the nail on the head there. Yeah. I mean, I always had my group of friends, but, like, we'd all, we're from Boston, man. We majority of our time we're drinking beers and watching the Patriots and Red Sox and the Celtics, right? And so, But like, yeah, if I had time where I didn't have to be at work or after work, like I didn't really want to be around anybody. Um, the party is just so significant. And I think the most significant part of that is just feeling that love that was in my life, because I didn't love myself, man. And it's like, wow, like that's what kept hitting me is like, I have zero love for me when all these people love me. And so I wanted to find a way to love myself and see what that meant and see what that did for me in life. And, it changes every relationship you have in your life, right? Like now to me, community, family, friends is, the most important thing I think I have in my life. They drive me. That's why I'm here, man. That's why we're having this conversation, right? I didn't take my life because truthfully, that felt like one of the first thoughts I had at that party was, I can't put that pain on these people. Like I could never face myself. I don't know what comes after if I took my life, but if I'm able to see, I don't know how I could ever face myself for doing that to my world. And so what was my decision? To find a way to return the love, and try to find like, what was it going to take? And I don't, Tyler, it's hard to explain, man, but like, I think there were a lot of signs coming at me much earlier in life, that were trying to direct me to the trail. Like I said, that book was in my hand in my early 20s. When I did maybe spend some time, like we had a family cabin in Maine that I spent a lot of time at in my youth. And, I loved exploring in the woods. I'd be like 7, 8 years old and I would take off, and it was deep in the woods, man. It wasn't like, well, it was on a dirt road. Like there were things that I truly loved about nature. I got away from it when I was like, got into like 12, 13, because then I always wanted to hang out with my friends and play stickball and stuff. But I'm telling you, like when I look back on everything, I think something was trying to tell me or pull me to the wilderness, and, trying to find that love that I wanted to return to everybody. Something just punched me in the gut saying, you belong out in the woods. You belong on a trail. And then you're going to get challenged for a while. Like, but you're going to end up through those challenges. You're going to end up finding that love you're seeking for yourself, and then watch what happens, And so, man, I love my people, brother. Like I love all my people, man. I love being around the people that I meet on trail. I love being around my family. I mean, I live in Santa Fe, New Mexico now, but I try to get home as much as I can. My family has been coming out here to visit. I'm about to hit the road for 8 weeks, and I'm going to spend a few weeks up in Massachusetts. Because it doesn't feel like I'm paying them back for everything they gave me to get me here. It just feels normal, man. I love my people. And so I'm a big firm believer in, as we have a certain amount of time on this planet, make the very best of it.
Yeah, that's awesome. I wanna go back to the Appalachian Trail. So you started and finished this hike. I'm a little bit curious what's kind of going through your head on these first few days, weeks, months, and as you get through this, like what led you to continue on with this hiking? And was hike the good hike something that came out of that trail, or was that something down the road that you kind of spun up?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, man. Great question. There are a couple of, there are a few significant days on the AT. One was early on when I was really struggling. I didn't go into this trail fit. I was heavy mentally and physically. And I was climbing a mountain, man, and it was hot. And I was really struggling with the trail and really angry. And just like, I was having this feeling like, man, I felt like I was drawn to this place to find my way. And I feel like this trail is trying to get me to quit. And, I quickly took my pack off and I sat on a rock about halfway up this climb, started talking to a tree like, hey, what's going on here? Like, this sucks. Like, this doesn't feel good. This is as hard as anything I've ever had to take on in my life. And I was really hoping that this was going to start showing me something different than that. And then I asked it, could you cut me some slack today? Like, can you get me to the top of this mountain as fast as possible? Can you cool the temps? I just need that, man. Please, please, please. So I threw my pack back on and started climbing back up. And within like a minute or two, I had my head down, I'm dripping sweat. I hear the rattle of a rattlesnake, and I'm like, oh man, I jump back. First time I've ever seen a rattlesnake in the wilderness, and it's coiled up right in the center of the trail. And I'm like, right after that conversation. And I kind of laughed like this, man. I laughed, but I cried a little bit at the same time. And I took some steps back, and I kept my distance, tapping the ground, trying to just kind of scare it off. But it dawned on me, man, that what I was asking for, I was never going to get, or I would get it. But what the trail was trying to tell me was, we're never going to give it to you. You're going to have to earn it, man. Like, that's not why you're out here, for us to like make this all so easy for you. Your life's been hard. This is going to be just as hard, but it's going to be more rewarding. You're going to feel accomplished. You're going to be inspired. And so that was the last time I asked the trail to take it easy on me. That snake eventually slithered it off into the woods. And I just said, hey man, this is what you asked for. This is what you signed up for. You wanted to find your way. And that day is always extremely important to me. You talk about the love of my life. I had a couple days here. My dad met me in Harper's Ferry, which is technically the halfway point. Just a really strong, powerful, emotional day to see some of that love be there supporting you, right? Coming down from Massachusetts. That meant the world to me. Same thing happened when I crossed into Massachusetts. My mom, my dad, my brother, my nephew, my niece, my friend Paul, like just being there, man, just like showering me with love and being proud of me, and just making me like feel, wow, man, this is actually what you were hoping would happen. These are the feelings that you were looking for. And so the last day that I'll mention is the last day, a few miles from the peak of Katahdin. The group that I've been hiking with for a couple months, I just told them I was going to separate. I just needed to reflect and to talk to myself about this experience. And couple things that came to mind. One, I thanked the trail, I thanked Mother Nature, I thanked the universe, and I said, hey, listen, I realized that you didn't bring me here and give me this to keep to myself. You're calling on me to be one of your disciples, a message bringer, whatever you want to call it. And I said, I promise you, I'll find a way. I'll dedicate my life to sharing what you've given me, what you taught me. So that certainly was the seeds being planted for Hike the Good Hike. And I was saying Hike the Good Hike less than a month into the Appalachian Trail. Sometimes those Facebook memories come back, and I had a video where I was out there and big puffy face and 5 o'clock shadow, and I just said a message to all my followers and friends on Facebook, and at the end I just said, whatever it takes, man, just keep hiking the good hike. So those 4 words have been with me for a while. And so coming off a trail, I knew no matter what I did, and surprisingly I went back to bartending. But like I said, man, I knew I could do this job very differently than what it was like for me before it. Like, get in, make your money, and go home, save your money, because the next hike will come. And within that next hike, we're going to start thinking about how we want to share this message of what's taking place in your life. That next hike came in 2017 when I took on the Pacific Crest Trail. And I made this decision. Not only am I going to do that, but I'm going to now start openly speaking about my mental health illness before the Appalachian Trail. Because I constantly was thinking, what do I do to spread this message? And, as brave as it was to take on the Appalachian Trail, it was just as difficult, but I see bravery in it to finally start speaking, not just to like my family and friends, but I was going to say this out loud. I was going to go on podcasts. I was going to write about it and say, I battled suicidal ideation. I battled depression. I battled narcissistic behavior. And these are the reasons that I found my way to hiking.
For the listeners, can you maybe just explain kind of the premise behind Hike the Good Hike and how it's evolved over the years?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, listen, so the whole point of Hike the Good Hike, I didn't know what I wanted to do with it, like initially, but I knew it would involve nature, and I knew it would involve helping people. And so it's involved a lot. It's still evolving. but we've got it in a place where I truly understand what I want it to be. And there's a few things that like fit into it. The first is wanting to grow our platform into communal-based platform. So through the website and through our social media, and we'll expand out as we learn new things. I want people to come on, and whether it's writing or videos, to tell their story that's similar to mine, not just through hiking, but anything that has to do with nature, whether it's mountain biking, kayaking, canoeing, I've talked to a guy that was a portrait photographer, and he was miserable and he was suicidal, and he changed the way he did his photography into being a nature photographer. And I was like, that's a story. Like, you didn't even have to go hiking. Like, you just changed the way you were shooting. You were shooting your shots, man. And, we want to grow it out. We want to have, man, my goal is to have hundreds upon hundreds of people telling their stories about how nature has helped impact their mental health for the better. We also want to bring on people to talk about the actual world of wilderness therapy and the pros and cons, because there are pros and cons. Am I technically, has it been wilderness therapy for me? No, it's just been my own path and what I've learned through nature. But there's actual, programs and such out there that are wilderness therapy programs. And so I want to have the science brought on so people can understand it and better, and understand what they should be looking for if there's something that they're interested in. The second part of that is taking 20 to 25% of our donations and supporting any program in the country that's dealing with mental health, and trying to use their program to either start something within their program that has to do with nature, or to, if they already have something within their program that has to do with nature, they're looking to expand it out. So we want to partner with people. We want to help them grow. I have this vision of, programs wanting to add an actual outdoor program that they can say, this is our Hike the Good Hike program, where they're leading hikes or mountain bikes or whatever the case may be, however they want to develop that. And so those are the two main things, right? Like, it's almost like, I guess the only thing you can really use is Facebook when you're talking about having people come on and having a profile and their own written pieces or their photography or their videos. That's, I don't see it be getting as big as that. But that's something I envision, man, it's a community-based platform, man. And that, listen, man, when I started looking into what kind of things might be good for me before I knew anything about hiking, finding stuff on hiking is what led me there. It started with that book, but then I started reading blogs and I started watching YouTube videos, and like, there was a spark and a light that like grew in me so quickly that I was like so inspired to give this a shot. And that's what I want Hike the Good Hike to be for other people, is that somebody who is struggling with their mental health and has tried different things, and those things, they may be working a little bit, but they feel like they need more. I want them to come across, or I want them to hear about Hike the Good Hike and come to our website and say, damn, man, I want to know more about this. I want to read more of these stories, and I want to create my own story. I want to, best case scenario, I want to come back here in a year or two and contribute my story on how nature has helped me get over some of the things that I'm struggling with.
There's a lot there that resonates with me. I know that whenever I get a chance to get outdoors, especially when I can get somewhere where there's no signal, right? I have to put my phone down. I can't even reach for it because there's nothing to do on there. You're forced away from all your vices, and you just kind of have to sit back and reflect and listen to nature and be one with your surroundings. That's something that I've always loved with truck camping and day hikes and stuff like that. I haven't done any through hikes like you have, but I'm also finding that as I build out this podcast and figure out what this brand is, all the guests that I'm bringing on, they have something as an outlet, whether it's mountain biking, snowmobiling, hiking, running. Like, there's all these things that people, they're all nature based, right? You're getting out there and doing some type of physical activity in nature, and it's something that I want to pull apart more as I have these guests on, to see how impactful it's been on their life, their mental health and physical health. And then, like, another part of that, I was saying this before the call, but I'm running a marathon in 2 weeks, and I haven't trained for I haven't trained competitively for anything since high school, 2009. And I thought it was cool that you mentioned that you ran in high school and did the mile. I did as well. I was not very good, but it feels
That's
so
all right.
good. Yeah, it feels so
Yeah.
good to like get out there and push myself towards a goal, even if it's just a goal for myself. And when you have to set time aside to work on this, like it kind of reduces the amount of time that I have for other vices. Like, instead of having a couple drinks every night, I have to make sure that my body is ready to get out there and do a 3-hour run the next day so that I can actually achieve this goal, because the goal is more important than those few drinks I have.
Mm-hmm.
And another thing is, like, when you are in those elements, I have 2 kids and my house is noisy. Like, I'm always talking with them or my wife, and this is like my one time to get out, run, push myself, and just think through some of my thoughts. So it's been really motivating for me. I'm a little fearful what happens once the marathon's over, but I think similar to you finish the Appalachian Trail and you dove right into the next one.
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm gonna prolong it with another race of some sort, probably
Mm-hmm.
a bike race, or I don't know. I just think that's you hit on a lot of notes there in your hike, the good hike spiel, and I what am I trying to say? I respect that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I respond to that? Because
Yeah, go ahead.
I think this is important. This is something that I talk a lot about, right? Is like, people may look at me and be like, well, I don't have time to go like 2,000-mile trails, right? It's what you just said right there, I think is really important, man, right? Especially when you're like, hey, that when I've got kids and I get outside and like, that's my time and kind of quiet things around me. I've had day hikes or even just a few hours outside in nature that have been just as impactful as hiking the Appalachian, the Pacific Crest, the Continental, like any major hike that I've taken on. I've had day hikes that I can look back and reflect, or I've written about, that have made just a difference, a positive difference in my life than the big trails. A couple things here. One, man, like, why I try to encourage people to get out into nature, away from the cities, the towns. And so is like, we were given this planet, man, long before we started developing on it, right? And it's like, you should take the time to see what we were given. Like there's just no better feeling of being on a mountain peak or in a valley, or like, and looking out at something that hasn't been touched and really getting a true understanding of planet Earth, man. Like, there's very few things that I've had in my life that have impacted me the way that impacts me. And so within that, if you think about that and you're struggling in any way whatsoever, mental health is health, man, right? Like, it doesn't have to be suicide. It can be simply, you're just not feeling great that day. There's a little bit of depression. You're stressed out. Things are heavy at home or at work. I like to always call that your chaos, right? Like, that's your chaos, man. And so what you deserve the right to do is to find a way to just take a break from your chaos, man. like get out of the city, get out of the house, go somewhere that's a bit more peaceful, very different than what you're in every single day, and let yourself take the time to take it in. When you're struggling with mental health, man, that's also your chaos, right? There's a lot of noise going on in your head, right? When you get out into nature and you don't have all that madness around you, that chaos quiets down. Like, it goes from tug of war argument in your head to, let's talk this out. Let's try to figure out what's going on in here. It quiets, dude. It turns into a conversation, man. And actually, most of the time, there's a result from that. Like, you're processing through something, and you're in an environment that's really conducive to what, excuse me, what you're trying to work through. And so that's what I tell people. When people tell me I don't like nature, I've heard this from people, and I go, well, why? Well, they're like, well, I haven't spent a lot of time in it because I just don't think I'm going to like it. And I'm like, you're just not giving it a chance, man. Like, you're not understanding. You don't have to go climb a mountain, man. Just go somewhere, put a blanket down on a river or a lake, and just chill out for a while, man. Or go sit on the beach. Go find a quiet beach in the morning when it's not filled with everybody, and just listen to the waves and watch your thought process, and really recognize how different your thought process is compared to when you're in the stuff that you're used to being in. And so that's what I always say. It's like, you deserve the right more than anything to kind of just take a break from your daily chaos and go find a place to kind of work some stuff out.
Yeah, I don't know where I heard it, but it's like stuck in my mind. You know, when in doubt or when things are hard, get back to nature. It's like I think of that phrase a lot. Get back to nature. And you know, even where I'm at, I'm in Michigan. We don't have mountains. We have a lot of water, but you know, I have to drive to some of them. But I've just kind of fallen in love with running the dirt roads around here. And no matter where you are, if you're in a city, there's like park areas. If you're in the country, there are trails nearby that you can get to. So this is something that's very accessible to anybody.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I would just encourage people to give it a shot. Go walk around your sidewalks or go find the local park and sit down and try to quiet yourself. Yeah, that's something that's definitely resonated with me a lot since I've had kids. And maybe that's just me getting older or getting more mature, but it's great. I love it.
Well, it's good you're seeing it, man. Honestly, it really is. Like I said, like I talk to a lot of people. I'm mentoring a bunch of people, and they're always very concerned about where they are at life. And I'm always like, how old are you? And they're like, 28, 32, 33. And I go, I didn't even take a step to start figuring this out until I was 40. Now, it doesn't mean you wait till that time, right? But understand, like, it takes time. Like that's what's important to understand. It takes time, right? Like, I'm 49, I turned 50 in 2 months, man. And like, I have a nonprofit, a lot of really good things in my life, but I'm still like trying to figure things out. Like there's still things that I want to be better at. There's still things that, that like I wish were more successful, or, we always overanalyze ourselves, but it just takes time. But as long as you're finding ways to make progress, even in the littlest of ways, that's progress.
Awesome. I want to bring this back to some of your hikes. You have actually accomplished the Triple Crown, and for those who don't know, that's doing the Appalachian Trail, the Pacific Crest Trail, and the Continental Divide Trail.
That's correct.
And I think you've done that in like the span of 8 years. What can you tell us about each of those trails and what makes them unique from one another? Which one's your favorite? And I don't know, I'm just curious, like the differences between some of them.
Yeah, I mean, listen, they're all three are much different, and all three have a lot of similarities, right? The AT is much more wilderness. You're pretty much start to finish hiking in deep wilderness with really difficult climbs, because there are no switchbacks on mountains for the majority of the Appalachian Trail. So that just means you're climbing straight up, a straight line all the way up and straight down, which straight downs are just as hard as the ups on your knees. But you're deep in wilderness all the time. And you just don't have like the mental challenge within that specifically to where you're hiking is just, it's like Groundhog Day, man. Like you're seeing wilderness for 2,200 miles. It's beautiful wilderness, and there's definitely really incredible views, and it's an amazing trail, but it certainly has its challenges, especially when you get to New England and you take on the White Mountains and Maine. What I needed with the Appalachian Trail was the community. It's the most popular trail in America, if not the world. There are a lot of people out there. You're hiking with people the whole time. And what I was going through, I needed that because, I was probably pretty judgmental in my life before it, and pick and chose who I would socialize with. And the AT really taught me that no matter what you look like, who you are, there's a lot of things that you might have in common. And I learned pretty early on that there were a lot of people out there working on their own mental health, their own struggles. And that was something I was really inspired me, encouraged me to keep going, is that I was surrounded by a good amount of people that were, maybe not fully in the same boat, but, there are different things that you definitely learned about PTSD and beyond. And so that, I think, is one thing that's really incredible about the AT is how the community itself, and it's pretty amazing. CDT.
It's wild the amount of people that talk about community when doing these through hikes. Because before I talked to anybody who's done the Appalachian Trail, I never really thought about it. You started this hike solo by yourself, no spouse, no friends or whatever. And just along the way, I know that you run into these pockets of people and you kind of adapt them as a family for weeks at a time. Yeah, I mean, I assume you still talk to these people and build a community of trust that with strangers, people you never even thought you'd get to know. And just by walking with them in quiet, right? No chaos in the world, you really get to connect with them. Yeah, it's crazy the community that people build in hiking and other events that I like to highlight on this podcast.
Yeah, we call it Tramley. It's our Tramley. And I'm still really good friends, not just acquaintances. I'm still really good friends with people from the AT, from the Pacific Crest Trail, and certainly the Continental Divide Trail. And so those people are like, you know, they're as important to me than anybody that came before hiking. You know, it's even a little different for sure. And as you can imagine, you spend so much time with one another out there that you talk about everything, right? Like you really get to know one another, and you do it quickly. I always like to say, like, your friendships that develop out there, you know, if you hike with someone for 2 months, it's like dog years, man. Because you're just with them so much that it's like, yeah, 2 months is actually like 3 years.
And you're forced to, you know, be uncomfortable with these people. It's not like going to the bar where you just show up, park, and sit there. You have to set up a camp together, make meals. Like you're really kind of breaking bread with people and getting to know them on an intimate level, which
you smell together. You're like you're jumping into lakes naked together, man. You don't care, you know, because you all have one common goal, man. It's like you're not thinking about all the type of goals you may have in life. You have one common goal. You're trying to finish this major trail, right? And so, like, you know, you're inspired by one another, and you need one another. You know,
I really like that. I like the common goal thing. You literally eliminated all the noise of the world to work towards the same thing, and that might be the like thing that brings people together when I'm talking to people with this podcast. Like, these guests are surrounding themselves around one event, you know, this marathon. We're all running towards the same thing. We're doing the Iditarod. You're all mushing towards the finish line. That's a really profound idea. I like that. This might be a great, you know, we're talking about Tramleys. Like, this might be a great time to mention how you actually got the Boston Mule nickname.
Yeah, man. Well, a lot of people always have theories on that, but it's not as exciting some of the theories I've heard. But, you know, early on in the south of the AT, we would go in, you know, every 5-6 days, we'd go into town to resupply our food. And of course, when we're in town, we're staying at a motel or a hostel, and we'd find where's the local bar with burgers. And so we'd all run down to get a burger and a drink. And, you know, and deep in the south, they don't have the most extensive bar. So I at that time liked to drink the Moscow Mule. And so I would try to order one, and the bartender would be like, "What the hell is Moscow Mule?" And like try to explain it. And they're like, "Ginger beer." He's like, "I got ginger ale." I'm like, "No, that's completely different." And so, you know, after like 2 or 3 bars of me trying to order this drink and getting denied, the crew that I was hiking with at the time, they were already calling me Boston, which I was just like, that's a real lame name, man. I'm sure there's 100 Bostons on the Appalachian Trail. But I try to order the drink, and one of the guys goes, "Boston, you're never going to get that mule." And this other guy that I was hiking with goes, "Yep, that's it. You're the Boston Mule." And I go, "I like it. I'll take that." I'll take that. On the PCT, when I was hiking with one guy, and he knew how I got that name. One day we were hiking in the Sierras, and Sierras were hard when we hiked it in 2017, a lot of snow. And, you know, I think we wanted to take a break or something. I was like, "No, we got to keep pushing on, man. Like, we got to keep pushing on." He goes, "I think it's a different definition of your name. You're as stubborn as a mule." And I was like, that's actually a better one. Better reasoning for the name. So that's how I got it.
I thought about showing up to this episode with my copper mug, and you wouldn't know what was in it, right? I have to work after this, so
I would have been excited. I'm like, all right.
Drop the ball there.
Yeah.
Yeah, continue to tell us about you went through the Appalachian Trail. Like, tell us about the CDT and PCT.
Yeah. So PCT was second. Very similar in terms of community. A lot of people out there. A lot of great people out there that I really enjoyed my hiking time with, but definitely a change in scenery throughout. You're in the desert, you're in the high Sierras, and you're in Northern California, which is wilderness. Then you're in Oregon, which is massive lakes and alpine lakes and rocky peaks. And then the same thing into Washington, some of the most beautiful rock formations and high rock peak mountains that I've ever seen. So there's always like this switch. You always know a switch is coming and what you're hiking in within your ecosystem's environment. And so those were amazing. Now the climbs were no climbs easy. Don't let anybody ever tell you if you've already interviewed hikers, if you have any coming and they're like, oh, the climb is easier because of the switchbacks. There's no such thing as an easy climb. They're all hard. It may be slightly easier than straight up and downs, but they were slightly easier, but they were much higher. You go from the highest peak on the AT, which I believe is Clingman's Dome at 6,800 feet, to us, climbing Whitney on PCT. Now, Whitney's a side trail, but everybody does it if you hike the PCT, but that's, I believe, 14.7, 14.8. So you learn about altitude. You learn about desert heat. It is a full cocktail of everything you can imagine on a hike. Insanely beautiful. Oregon is just something else, man. The lakes, Crater Lake, there's just nothing like it. There are things that I always encourage people. You don't have to hike to them. Someplace like Crater Lake, you can drive there. You got to see it. It's the most beautiful thing you've ever seen. And then the CDT, man, is the Appalachian Trail and the Pacific Crest Trail. They had a baby. And that is the CDT, which is definitely the hardest of the three, man. Very similar to the PCT in terms of you have a lot of different environments that you hike through. But I hiked it southbound, and I started in Glacier National Park, and right out the gate. I mean, talk about a challenge! Some really challenging climbs, man. Just really big elevation gains in the day, 3,500 feet or so in a day, maybe 4,000, and just needing to attack early on. Stunning. And the wildlife, very different. You're talking grizzly bears, you're talking a lot of moose and elk. I had my first grizzly encounter on day 2, so I knew I was in for a treat for the rest of this trail. I was like, I'm just 2 days in, and I'm like 30 feet from a grizzly bear that's looking at me. And so, yeah. But throughout, I mean, listen, man, like, it's staggering. It's difficult. Wyoming is gorgeous. Yellowstone has a lot to really offer. And then you hit Colorado. And I think what makes the CDT the hardest is, like, whether you do it southbound or northbound, Colorado is like, comes at a point where it's like, the challenge of it is significant, man. There is like no other state in this country like Colorado to hike, because you are literally climbing some of the hardest climbing you've ever done every single day. Like, there's very few breaks of climbing, and you're taking on hard, challenging, you're navigating some tests, man, for sure. Like, there's some danger to it for sure. And I certainly have a story that I can tell you about that when you're ready. And again, and taking it on southbound, one of the biggest, you come out of Colorado, you're at the tail end, and you're about to hit New Mexico, and those temperatures drop, man. It gets cold. We dealt with, we had one morning we woke up, it was 9 degrees. I mean, we were sleeping at night, typically anywhere from 18 to 12 degrees. And, that's probably, I'd rather take on those challenging climbs, man, than have to wake up in that kind of weather. Because usually you're waking up and that sun's not hitting you yet, and you got to break that camp down, and you can't feel your hands. There's so much pain. You get nauseous, when you get nauseous, you're on that verge of hypothermia, and that's just not a fun feeling, not at all. And so for me, I mean, on a personal level, the fact that I live in Santa Fe, New Mexico, the fact that I got to end my Triple Crown crossing the state that I call my adopted home, was incredibly special for me. And I always say this is probably the most underrated state in America for beauty, for different, like we have everything from 12,000 footers to true desert hiking, man. And it's like, and you have everything in between, and there's something for everybody here. It's a beautiful, beautiful state, and certainly a great way to end the Triple Crown.
When did you move out to New Mexico? Was that a part of that trail, or had you already moved out there?
I already moved out there, man. I got out here about 4.5 years ago. This is very similar to hiking the Appalachian Trail, man. I knew I wanted to start developing a nonprofit, and I was still in Boston, and I just was like, my gut was telling me this isn't the place anymore. You need to go find a place that's more conducive to your mindset in this work. And I bought an old Chevy van that was built out with a bed and the sink and everything in it. And I told my family, listen, I'm gonna go take a trip, and I don't think I'm gonna come back. And they're like, what? And I was like, yeah, I think I'm gonna go to New Mexico. And they were like, wow, all right. When did you? And I remember my mom being like, when did you hike there? Why do you love New Mexico? And I'm like, I haven't. I've never been, but I'm being pulled. Something's pulling me to New Mexico. And so it was like the same thing with AT, man. I was like, I'm just gonna take this crazy big leap, man. I'm gonna drive this '93 Chevy van out to New Mexico, and I'm gonna work to make it my home. And it worked out.
I'm mad that you brought up the camper van, because that's always been a passion of mine, and I want to pull that apart, but I also want to be conscious of our time here. So maybe you'll have to come on another time and tell us about that thing.
Happy to.
One thing we were talking about before the call is the way I found out about you was through Puddin, who is another hiker. She does tons of hikes. I don't think she's done her Triple Crown yet, but she mentioned you, but didn't lead on to the fact that you guys actually did a ton of the CDT together. And I thought that was fascinating, because I don't know, you got all these miles. How many miles have you put into hiking so far?
Over 15,000 since I started the Appalachian.
15,000. Yeah. So you got 15,000 miles of hiking, and you cross paths with this complete stranger through Instagram or something, and it just so happens that your worlds collide, and you're actually hiking the same trail at the same time. And you're at the same leg of the same trail at the same time, so that you guys can actually meet up and hike with each other. I have to imagine that was like a pretty monumental moment, meeting this stranger in this community that you guys have built out, and kind of completing a lot of this trail together. Can you kind of tell us about that and how you got to know her?
Yeah. So, Puddin had done a ton of hiking over the last year and a half. And when she was on the Florida Trail last year, I was as well. I was a couple of weeks ahead of her. And we became friends on Instagram. And of course, once we knew we were on the same trail, we were cheering each other on, but didn't think it was going to be possible to cross paths. So I had a window that I had to hike it in. And so I couldn't kind of slow down or wait for her. But we got to know each other.
I'm imagining like a road trip where you pick up the phone and say, hey, beware, there's a cop, there's a speed trap up ahead. You'll see it in a few days.
Yeah. Ours is more like, hey, beware, there's 150 gators in your future, just let you know. And so, but we were super supportive of one another, and we're cheering each other on. And then, a few months later, I'm a couple weeks into the Continental Divide Trail, and I see her post that she's at the terminus starting her own southbound CDT, and I message her, and I'm like, you're on the CDT? She's like, oh my God, Boston, I just realized you are as well. I was like, well, I don't know if we're going to be able to, here we are again, a couple of weeks apart. But if it works, it works. If it doesn't, it doesn't. Let's just keep cheering each other on. But by chance, man, by the time I was sitting at a hostel in Salida, Colorado, and just outside on the phone with my dad, and this young lady walks up with her big pack on, and she looks and she goes, Boston, in her Alabama Southern twang. Boston, is that you? And I go, oh man, it's Puddin. But we were really excited to see one another, man. And we knew right away that we were gonna conquer some miles together. And I gotta tell you, and this is the honest to God truth, at that point, man, I was pretty worn out physically and mentally. I wasn't enjoying hiking. It became really robotic. Like last year, my goal was 5,000 miles of hiking, and I was well on pace. But I started losing the fact that how much I loved hiking and felt more like I was doing it for something differently. And like I just lost vision of who I was and what hiking meant to me. And I was really struggling. I wasn't going to quit, but it just was like, man, this is weird to do something that I know that I love, and I'm not finding the love for it. And connecting with Pudding and sharing time with her and being able to be with somebody that we came to find had a lot of things in common, especially when it came to mental health and life struggles. We needed each other, man. And that circumstance happened because the power of hiking and Mother Nature brought us together, because it really lit a fire in both of us. And we both started finding, like, I knew she was struggling with it as well. And we both found that love for hiking again. And we basically just made a promise to one another that, listen, all hikers butt heads, doesn't matter. If you spend a lot of time on trail every day with somebody, male, female, whatever the case may be, you're gonna drive each other crazy sometimes too. But we made a pact, no matter what. We were gonna get one another to Mexico. And we did, man. We from Salada, Colorado, we hiked every step of that trail together to the end.
That's so cool. I love that. I love that, some of these guests are coming together in ways that I didn't know about. Yeah. So where do we want to go from here? I always leave time at the end of the podcast for the guests to tell stories. You've done 15,000 miles of hiking. There has to be some terrible, terrible stories at the time that you always come back to and love telling around the dinner table and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Open floor, just give me some good stories that I can smile along to.
I'll give you a good one, man. This is my favorite. And this is from the Continental Divide Trail. I had hiked 1,600 miles with this guy Shady too, who also extremely important brother to me, man, with the stuff that we shared with one another. We were kind of in the Idaho, Montana area, tail end. And so we cooked us some dinner. we're in grizzly country, so we know we have to hang our food. Sometimes you get a little lazy about how you hang your food. But we hung. But we cooked our dinner. We ate our dinner further away from where we already had set camp. We didn't want the scent around our tents. And then we found a branch, and we were able to just kind of toss over easily. It should have been certainly should have been a higher throw of the rope to hang the food, but we got it up there, and then we walked back to our campsite, which was across the trail on the other side. And so the food hung, and so in the morning around 6:30, I hear a faint thump, and I'm like, huh. And I'm like, I know that kind of came from the direction of where we hung our food. And I go, Shady. And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, did you hear that? He's like, I thought I heard something. Yeah. I'm like, I'm going to go check it out, man, because it sounds like it came from the food bag direction. So I get up. So where the food is, the tree is hanging, but there's really high grass, so I can't see the ground much. But I'm probably half a football field's length away from where we hung it. And I see his bag, but I don't see mine. And I'm like, oh, so initially I'm like, I just hope the branch broke. So I make some noise, and from the brush, a bear's head pops up. It's a black bear, not a grizzly. Okay. So I'm like, all right. So I go, Shady. He's like, what? I'm like, a bear got my food. And he starts laughing. He thinks I'm kidding. He's like, yeah. I'm like, no, Shady, get out here. So Shady walks out. By this point, the bear has gone back down to try to rip the bag open. And he's like, what are you talking about? I'm like, make some noise. And so Shady yells a bit. Bear's head popped back up. And he's like, oh, no. He goes, oh, no, dude, you lost your food. I'm like, well, your food bag's right above it. So neither one of us have food. And I was like, let's get our hiking poles. He's like, what do you mean? I'm like, get your hiking poles. So we got our hiking poles, and we walk about halfway of that half of a football field, and we start making as much noise as possible, man. We're yelling and clicking our poles together, and now we can just see the full bear on top of my bag, trying to work its way into it. Good job, Z-Packs plug here, by the way. That bag held its own. And that bear was like, no way, this is mine. You're not getting it. It would bluff charge at us a bit. So it would like scratch at the ground. And I'm like screaming at it, and Shady screaming at it. We're like, what are we doing? And I'm like, get up. And all of a sudden, like the angrier I get, the more my Boston accent pops out. And Shady says I start sounding like Maki. I'm like, get off my bag, bear. Like I'm cussing. I'm like, we're just going toe to toe with this thing, man. And it is fighting back. It's like bluff charging, and we're throwing rocks in its direction just to make it think maybe there's more people. And finally that bear gets up and it walks away from the food, but then it goes over a dead tree and turns around and just plumps down on the dead tree, like its arms over it, just staring at us like, who's going to win this battle? And it took us about another half an hour, and it finally ran up the hill. We scared it enough and got over, and there was only a small little slice in my bag, fully intact with all my food in it. And Shady says to me, dude, man, you've got a lot of experience with bears, man. I can't believe you did that. And I said, I got no experiences. I have no business doing what we just did. But I have the story that I fought a bear off to win my food back.
Yeah, you could do that with a black bear or brown bear.
You could do that with Grizzly. He and I were like, that's it. We're gonna have to. The Grizzly wins every time.
We might be hungry for a few days. We got to get a new bag.
Yeah, black bear. I'll put up a fight.
Oh, that's a good story. That's a good story and a good plug. I like that.
Yeah, Z-Packs are like that.
Is there any other stories you want to tell? Otherwise, we can start to wrap it up. I think that was awesome.
I mean, listen, I've had a lot of wildlife. I did in Colorado. I did get hit in a rock slide. That was really scary. It took me down about 300 feet before I was able to kind of grab onto a bigger rock. But that was a mess in itself, and it took me a while. I couldn't get back up because it was all rock, loose rock, and anytime I tried to make my way back up, I would just slide a little further. It took me almost 3 hours to get down to the valley, and I'd say 90% of getting down, I had to slide down on my ass, man. So my shorts were ripped up, but there were day hikers in the valley that saw me for like the last hour, directing me in ways to make sure I was avoiding trouble because there were cliffs that I couldn't see. And my adrenaline was going for 3 straight hours, dude. And that probably, I've been through some scary stuff. The Sierras is pretty scary when it's covered in snow, but that was pretty terrifying because for a brief moment, I thought when I was sliding really fast, oh man, this is it. But I got to the bottom and those guys waited for me, and I appreciate those guys. One guy pulled out a bottle of bourbon and let me take a swig, which was highly needed at the moment. And they took me to a small town about 15 miles up the road, and I just got a room, and I sat in a bathtub for a good 2 hours just swinging. All right, man, you survived. Got to get back out there tomorrow and do it again. You know?
That's so nice that they like waited that whole endeavor out for you. Like,
yeah, those guys were awesome, man. I appreciate them because they could see I was in trouble, and they were like, "We're not going anywhere until this guy is safe." But it was at 13K. It was at 13,000 feet, man. That's high up.
A long way down and a long way back up too.
Yeah.
Same goal, man. Working towards the same goal. You can slow down and help people out.
Exactly.
I bet he pulls that bourbon out at just like the most epic times, and it's just like,
great.
We accomplished something. You know what time it is. Here's the bourbon.
Yeah, I'm sure when he asked, the look I gave him was an absolute yes. I was like, give me that now. And thank you.
Glug. Oh man. So what's next for you, Jesse? And
Yeah, man. Telling you about the nonprofit, just really putting that work in for the remainder of the year. We do have people. So on the back end, my team is constructing new pages for the website, which is awesome. They're going to be ready in 2 weeks. We already have written pieces that are going up. So we're starting our contribution part, which is awesome. I'm looking forward to getting stories up there and plugging these people. Some of them are currently hiking big trails, which is great, but continuing to push to get more than hikers to come on and tell the story. I'm taking this 8-week road trip right now in my car, but I'm doing hiking events and I'm doing a lot of speaking. Speaking and being trained to be a keynote speaker is something that's coming my way in the future. Something I think is going to be amazing and really important to grow my nonprofit. And most importantly, dude, I'm not done hiking. This fall, I'm taking on the Arizona Trail with a couple of really badass hikers, friends of mine. And we're going to attempt to do an 800-mile trail in less than 30 days. So we're going to try to average a marathon. And that's kind of for me. Yeah. Well, I'm not going to say it on your podcast, but when we hit the not recording button anymore, I'll let you know what's in the plan for next year. I'm not ready to make that announcement, but I can't say that the reason I'm doing this is to see if I can handle something even bigger next year in terms of major miles. So, yeah, the hiking is always going to be an important part of it. The speaking is going to be an important part of it. I'm writing a book, which is amazing, about 2023 called 5,000 Pieces of Me, in reference to the 5,000 miles that I took on. And just keep going forward, man. That's all I can do, man. And take all the little successes and make sure they outweigh the times that I'm a little worried or stressed out or dealing with imposter syndrome, and just tell myself, it's all right, man. This is life. This is what it's all about. Keep plowing forward. Like the first day you stepped off of Springer Mountain in Georgia on the AT.
I love it. I got a lot of respect for everything you're doing, man. I've interviewed a handful of ultra marathon runners, and you saying that you're going to be hiking a marathon a day just kind of blew my mind a little bit. Man,
yeah, that's a lot. It's a lot.
That's really good. So how can people find you? How can people support the cause? And is there any shout outs you want to give before we close this thing up?
Yeah, I mean, it's easy to find me. I'm on all social media, social media at Hike the Good Hike. And the website is hikethegoodhike.org. We always need support. We're still fairly new as a nonprofit and still figuring out how to make things a bit more consistent with bringing in revenue and such. But, so we're always looking for people to help out, help us grow. But we've got great things on the horizon. I'm really excited about where Hike the Good Hike is heading, and come on over and follow it. At least come over and follow it and watch me attempt 800 miles, averaging 26 miles a day. Shout out to just those people that love me, man, that I love back. I've got really great people in my corner. I do have great companies in my corner. Z-Packs, Hoka, Hiker Hunger, Ned. I mean, there's a lot of really good people that believe in me and my mission and what we're trying to do. And I don't know if I'd be able to do what I've done so far without them. So thanks for having me on, man. And a shout out to you, Tyler. Appreciate it.
Yeah, go check out his page. Even if you just want to see some beautiful photos of nature, the Instagram page is awesome, and the website's very professionally well done. So thanks again, Jesse. This was a blast. Thank you for listening to the High Quality Fun podcast. If you guys enjoyed this show, please give us a follow. And if you have a good story or just want to say hi, feel free to reach out to us on Instagram or YouTube. Thanks for listening.